welcome life artist to another episode of the Art of Life podcast. And this week we are talking about something very near and dear to my heart. I'm actually recording this on Sunday morning, and I usually try and get ahead of the podcast, but this is a subject that's very important to me, that I've spent my whole life contemplating, that my relationship with has changed a lot, and it's integrity. Because integrity is something I was raised with. It's something that was I was always told from my parents that your word is your bond. It's everything. That's what makes you a man. That's what makes you a good person. And in my lifetime, I did many courses about life optimization and high performance and personal and professional development. And we touched on integrity a lot. And something I realized is integrity is oftentimes looked at as right or wrong. And I don't think integrity has anything to do with morals. So I went up and I looked up, because I talk about this in the podcast all the time. We use words all the time, and then we ask ourselves to define them, and we can't. But we understand them conceptually, which to me tells me I don't have as grasp of the language as much as I think I do. But that's one of the reasons I love having this podcast, is I will go in and look up definition of words, and that'll change my relationship with that word. So integrity is way more about authenticity. It's about being true to ourselves, and it serves as the foundation for everything in our power and our effectiveness in how we show up for this world. And integrity is not confined by any kind of rules or demands, right? When you look at law and there's legal loopholes, it's not about that. It's about holding yourself to your values and your principles and your word. But what if you say something and you realize it's against your values? And we're going to go through some dicey, ideal situations here that would challenge your integrity, where two of people that have different values can be in the exact same situation and behave in totally opposite ways, and both be in integrity to their own character. So to have integrity, first and foremost, you must know yourself. What do you value most in this world? What do you think is most important? For myself, freedom is a really big one. That's any pursuit of monetary gains has to do with freedom of being able to access things, and that's the plight of capitalism. Not that I'm going to discuss capitalism, socialism, or my opinions on that, but the reality is we need money to be free, right? And that's got a whole other relationship, but freedom for me is something that is what being radically alive is. And freedom is no constraints. And that means not worrying about looking good. That means having access to getting on a plane and going somewhere. That means access to my friend's getting married in Portugal. I can afford to go and celebrate with them. So that for me, and my integrity lies in freedom, but that also lies in not only my freedom, but the freedom of the people around me. If I value that truly, and I'm an empathetic and good person, it has to be for everyone. So that means being uncomfortable, right? And I also, and it's probably from being bullied, I don't know, one of my things that triggers me, that brings up the most emotion, is seeing abusive power. Anytime I see an abusive power, it truly makes me feel very angry, very triggered, I remember I was walking, this was many years ago, 2019, and I saw this kid who was bigger than the other kid, shove the kid to the ground. And I ran after this kid and I yelled at him. I'm what are you doing? You're bigger than him. You can't treat him like that. He could have got hurt. And he's oh, he gave me. I was I don't care. And I was yelling at him when I was with someone. And they're Matt, chill. I was no, you can't treat people like that. And not realizing that was pretty harsh on the kid. Kids bully kids. It's human nature. But that was a part of me that was being triggered, which is pretty crazy to think about. But yeah, back to the integrity of things. So let's look into some dicey situations. So what is more important, being true to your word or being true to your values? My dad always said to me, he was trying to explain the hierarchy of values, but he said, I would never lie, steal, or cheat. But if you, your mom, or your brother's life depended on it, I would lie, I would steal, I would cheat, I would do whatever it needs to keep you guys alive and safe, right? So is that going against your word? That's living in integrity, understanding how much you love your family, and you're willing to break your word to care for them, right? It's so let's talk about the example of two people in the exact same situation, behaving differently, but acting in perfect integrity. So allegedly your friend is telling you that they're having an affair, and you're someone who really believes in like loyalty, honesty, and that really bothers you. One person might go and tell their partner and be like, hey, this such and such is having an affair. One person's values might line them up with their friend, and they might say, that's where I owe my loyalty. I don't know this other person. And both people behave totally differently, but both in integrity to their own values and beliefs. Now, I use the word perfect integrity, but perfect integrity doesn't exist. And I learned this through doing those courses. I did 4 courses through a curriculum called Landmark, and we like dove into integrity, right? And there were like rules for being while you're in the courses, like no gossiping. And then I remember we were talking about, like, what do you define gossip? Like, what if it's about this or that? And they're like, only you can define what you know is to be gossip. And so maybe it is gossip, but maybe it's good. Maybe it's like, I don't really want to gossip about this person, but I know they're predatorial and they're going to work at a kid's school. Is that gossip? No, right? So it's really the definition of the words and how we show up in the world is very important. And I think integrity is less about being true to your word and more about being true to your values, beliefs, and how you want the world to be. And your word should be shaped around your integrity. But the reality is, in this world, we spew out words all the time. We talk, we say things. And I know, like, I'm not the only one. I made a video about this a while ago where it's like I said something. I was like, why did I say that? Because that's just how we behave as humans. We just talk. You know, if we spend 20 hours a day talking, how much of that is bullshit? You know, how much of that is nonsense? How much of that is just like cracking a joke, you know? Because I'll joke that I'm a baby and also joke that I'm an old man. Both are kind of true, right? So the power of our words, which like I really picked up doing this podcast and realizing like, man, words are spells that allow us to elicit emotion and ideas in people. Words are so powerful. And I understand people that take vows of silence now more than ever, because when you're like, I'm someone like I go to counseling pretty often, usually weekly, depending on my schedule. But the value I find in counseling is that I'm talking to someone who's not involved in my life about everything. And she doesn't talk that much. But as I'm talking, I get ideas about things I said. And I was like, there's like a contradiction there, or there's a lack of integrity there, or I need to be, doing better or such and such. Or I didn't know that was bothering me. I just said that I was feeling this way. So the value of word and our integrity. So like, I don't know, we can go down this hole of infinite, explanations. But the truth is, that's why it's important to think about how you're going to behave in certain situations. Or when you come face to face with a situation, you sit and wonder, how do I act in the most true way to myself based on my values and beliefs and how I want to show up in the world? There's a famous trolley paradox, which I'm sure many of you who are listening to this are familiar with. If you're standing at a train and you see the train is about to drive over 5 people that are tied to the train tracks, but there's a switch and it's going to switch it to another train track. So it's going to divert the train, and on the other train track there's one person. Would you pull the lever? And most people will be like, yeah, of course, you got to kill someone, but you save 5 people. Then you put them in the exact same context where like you're standing on a bridge above a train and the train is about to run over 5 people. You are an engineer in trains, and you understand the only way to stop this is to put something, 250 pounds in front of it, and next to you there's a large person that weighs more than that. You could push them off the bridge and save those 5 people, but would you do it? Probably not, right? We can dive into why, right? Because they're not in a situation where they, like, one of them has to die, but they're essentially the same thing. So understanding how we show up in life, how we want to behave when situations happen, whether it's like self-defense or lack of values or lack of integrity, not lack of values, allowing us to show up in life in capacities that are true to ourselves. And there's power in that. There's so much power to living in your integrity, because instead of spending time wondering what if, you've already thought about how I'm going to behave in this way. Which brings me into the next thing I want to talk about, and it's radical honesty. And I truly love the word radical. And it's really a synonym for extreme. And whenever there's synonyms, there's slight differences. But when you look up what radical means, it's like very different from the usual or traditional. So like it's one thing to be honest. It's another thing to be radically honest. Because we're going through life and we have intentions, and sometimes I can be really honest about like, I don't like your new haircut, or I think you're putting on weight, and sometimes things don't need to be said, and we have to decide when we want to say those things. But the idea behind radical honesty is it's a practice of complete honesty without even white lies. And now, again, just like perfect integrity doesn't exist, true, perfect, radical honesty doesn't exist. But it's something to thrive for. Going beyond conventional truthfulness, right? Not based on any social norms, just because, yeah, you might hurt some people's feelings, but people will never wonder where they stand with you. People will never have to worry about where they trust you because you've built a resume of times where you've been uncomfortable saying the truth. Acknowledging that, like, this is what it is and this is how I feel about it and this is the fact, and there's no white lies. And that's like truly that radical honesty is living in integrity a lot of the ways. So I don't have to worry about getting caught in a white lie. An example I could think of is like, if your friend asks you for a favor, like, hey, I'm moving, you want to come help me move this couch? And you've had a really long week and you're sore and you don't want to help your friend. So what do most people do? We're going to be like, make up an excuse. Oh, I can't, I got to do this thing. But the truth is, there's not a thing. So wouldn't you rather just be like, hey, I don't want to do that. I'm really tired, my body hurts, I don't have the social battery to do that. And that's the truth. And if they get angry at that, you ask them, like, would you rather I lie to you? Or would you rather just know exactly where I stand? Like, I don't want to help you move this weekend. I don't have the energy, I don't have the time. I'm sorry, I know you need my help, but I can't do that right now. And that's something I talk about. Like, I joke all the time that I have autism. I think I have a touch of it. I have ADHD, I have dyslexia, which are all like labels and stuff that help me just identify how my brain works. But the idea behind not understanding social cues and just saying things for the idea of honesty, I think that's a really powerful way. And that goes with like, hey, we didn't discuss this, but it sounds like you have an expectation, let's talk about it. Hey, let's check in and have a conversation. Like that radical honesty, which like as I'm talking about, I get anxiety about. As I'm sure you're listening, you're like, man, that's anxiety ridden. But what it does is it gets rid of all the other anxiety in your life because you have no energy to spend on, oh, what should I say? You just say what it is. You just show up in a capacity with no worry about looking good, just being true to yourself, your values, and your own integrity. That's it for this week's episode. And as always, we are signing off with a quote. Let's get that quote going. The quote for this week is, integrity gives you real freedom because you have nothing to fear since you have nothing left to hide. And with that, my friends, cheers. Thank you very much. Please follow us on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. Instagram and TikTok is at AOL Podcast. And on YouTube, it's at the Art of Life Podcast. And please rate the show 5 stars. Share it with someone you think would find value. That helps me immensely as I continue to grow this thing. Thank you for tuning in with me every week. I appreciate you guys very much. And I will see you next week. One love.